Alex, is the internet still on fire? Is it safe to come out?
I mean, to your first question, probably.
You're saying you haven't
Second,
looked?
to your second question, never has it ever actually been safe to come out and just kind of do whatever on the internet. That's never been true.
That's true.
Especially not now. So if you're waiting for like some sort of like all clear to get back to the internet and just kind of exist without just endless suffering, I have an unfortunate news flash for you. That is never going to take place.
Oh man, that's rough.
Yeah, yeah.
Bleak outlook on the internet. You should write a review of the internet for the site.
1 stars out of 5 is dumb. That is my entire review. There it is on the put it on the internet.
How did it get the 1 star? Is that
Well,
just that's
because we
all?
don't have a fucking 0 star on our scale. That's why.
So you're saying that if which you've argued for in the past, you've had was it Blackwater was the one you felt uncomfortable even giving a star, right?
Yeah, yeah. That was definitely the prime example of a game that deserves no stars. It is so black that light should not be able to escape from it.
The internet can be okay sometimes. Or is that the equivalent of well Blackwater turns on? Like it boots up.
Yeah, it is. It allows people to connect to it. So yeah, you're right. It has that basic level of functionality, I suppose. That is a reasonable thing to say, I guess.
It's been weird, like in the past, a couple of months, especially given the stuff that's going on, and I've been in some ways more connected to the internet than ever, at least paying more attention to all sorts of different avenues and what I say and how I say it and blah 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 blah. And yet, having lost my phone recently, more disconnected than ever. I got access to another phone, like a friend's phone,
Uh,
while I figure out what I'm doing with mine. And I don't know. It was kind of nice to not be able to check Twitter at all, ever, for
I've
like a week and a
created
half.
I've created this new rule set for myself, which is that unless something significant is going on that I really feel like I need to weigh in on, or I just, I have a really good dumb joke that I feel like barfing out, I don't use any kind of like social media or anything on the weekends. I just don't do it. I'll check every once in a while, just to kind of, keep up on making sure that the fires haven't spread too far. But I've essentially excised it from my weekend routine, and my God, do I feel a whole lot better doing that.
Yeah, I can understand it. It's just what's so nice about that stuff is there's always something new, so it fills time in a I'm not gonna say meaningful, but it fills time.
It
Time
does
goes
fill
away.
time. You know what else fills time is lying face down on your floor.
Well, I guess you're right. The passage of time is inevitable.
Yes, the
It,
time
it,
is going to pass no matter what you're doing. What you choose to do with that time is ultimately up to you. You can spend your time on social media forever yelling at the void, which essentially will just scream a cacophony of indecipherable noise back at you should you choose to engage it. Or you could exercise. You could play some games. You could lay down face down on the floor and scream into a pillow for 6 hours straight. You could do any of those things, and that would indeed allow time to pass.
it's true. The one thing I'll say, probably the most awkward thing about not having a phone that, if any, only underscores how much of a problem it has become, like sort of how we've been habitualized to it, is when the inevitable moment of going to lunch or dinner, and like a casual lunch where it's not like we're fancy and we're all really paying attention to what's going on, but the kind of lunch where, when conversation dies down, people pull out their phone and check whatever. It's like, well, I guess I'll pull out my drug user burner phone that I picked up from Best Buy, which is technically capable of stuff. I'm not 100% sure. It has a game and app store. I'll say that. I don't know what's in it because I feel like I'm already on some list for owning this phone. Like who
There's
owns it?
content to be made here. Patrick reviews the games available to
Oh
him on his
man,
burner phone.
on the LG 440 App Store. Wow. Yeah, when I went to Best Buy to grab something, just so I would have it for emergencies, like when I run and things like that. Um, those types of phones started about 25, but I got lucky. Best Buy was having a fire sale on the LG 440, $5. Great, 1.3 megapixels, Bluetooth.
Ooh.
Yeah. Even the march of progress even applies to the phones primarily used by folks engaged in shady activities, and I'm now happy to join their ranks.
Yeah.
It is it has been interesting to have a device in which I can't do as much on it. I don't think it's a net positive given the other things that I'm able to get out of it, like directions to places, which is
Right.
probably my primary app that I use on a phone because I have a terrible sense of natural direction.
Oh
But
God. Yeah.
the other elements of it I don't have everyone pulls out their phone and I'm like I don't have a reason to pull it out. Like nobody has this number. I can't even pretend to be checking something. In fact, it would look sad if I was doing it.
Do you have the phone? Like, can I see what the burner
No,
phone looks
there's,
like?
I'll still have it on Friday. I mean,
Okay.
I guess I'll still technically have it on Friday. Like I said, I have an iPhone from a friend while I figure out what I'm doing with so you cannot purchase full-priced phones from Apple's website. That's
Mm.
just not a thing you can do. You can only purchase upgrade phones. So even though I'm more than I'd say more than willing, even though I have come to the conclusion that I will pay a stupid amount of money for this replacement phone and then just have lost insurance on it going forward and just be done with it. Even though I've only lost one phone the whole time, but now I'm super paranoid about it, just the way
Well,
that.
it only takes once. It takes
Yeah.
one time for that to happen for you to forever be paranoid about that.
Yes. And so you can't buy them full price on the website. So you have to just wait till they show up at the store. But that's not going to get easier between now and Christmas. So I mostly just have to, call, once a day each week, and then hope they've got them in stock. But otherwise, I wasn't. If I was going to try and wait, it was going to be kind of ridiculous. So
Wait, have they not had them in stores of late? Because
not
my
where you can just
understanding was
walk in. Not where you can just walk in. No.
really.
Yeah, when I lost mine and it was a month later, I figured I can probably just like walk in and they have a 2-week return policy, so I was like, well, I'll just buy whatever they have and then I'll come back and get the one I want later
Right.
if that's the case. But no, they were like, yeah, you're fucked, dude, and it's almost Christmas, so you're double fucked. I was like, oh, huh.
No, so not even like the I don't know what carrier you're on, and you don't have to say, but like not even like the Verizon or AT&T stores. Do they have those things?
No, you can check online, to see if stuff's in stock, and nothing's in stock. So I don't know. So
You need to come to the AT&T store below my apartment because holy shit, they've got iPhones coming out their asses. Like they got signs all over the place just saying, "We got iPhones. I don't know. Come please buy some shit."
maybe I'll have to PayPal you a bunch of money to go to your place below your apartment.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. To be fair, I don't necessarily trust those guys because
That's
they
fair.
seem to spend more money remodeling their store than they do actually doing anything else there. So,
They
or time rather.
maybe you can go buy me a bunch of LG 440s.
Yeah, there we
I
go.
think I'm actually gonna have to review the games on this phone now. I don't I don't think I'm gonna be able to capture footage from it though.
You should get a BlackBerry. Can you still get Blackberries? Just get a BlackBerry. Just become.
Yeah.
I
There you
am
go.
become Keeley.
And just have I'll have my 5S from a friend, and I'll have a BlackBerry on my for the important emails I need to answer.
Yeah, the many important emails that you must be answering at all times.
Yeah.
Just live
So,
like me. Don't ever answer your emails. Apparently, I don't.
yeah, that's the
That's what I
giant
keep
bomb.
hearing.
That's the giant bomb philosophy, basically. Like,
Yeah.
when you get hired, like, hey, by the way, we need to make sure. Are you someone that can, for an extraordinary amount of time, not answer important emails? Well, then you have come to the right website.
Yeah. No, it's in our charter.
Whew.
Oh, God damn it. All right. Patrick, how was your weekend? What did you play? What's been going on?
I went to Minnesota. I had to go to a wedding out there, so Minnesota's pretty cool. It was really nice weather. I got to have finally, after seeing it on several television shows. Not recently, but over the course of the last 10 years, the Juicy Lucy, which is part of in Minneapolis, is part of like this sort of like it's one of those stories where it's not quite clear who came up with the burger first, but two places claim they came up with it first, and then there's just sort of like these endless stories about who actually was the one that came up with it first. And the Juicy Lucy is where the cheese is inside the burger. And, it's like two patties, and then the cheese is in the middle, so the cheese is like piping hot and like really tasty when you're biting into the burger, as opposed to being melted on the burger as the patty is finishing cooking. Really damn good burger.
I think I've had one of those.
They're like not uncommon now. When this got started I think Matt's Bar started in the one we went to, Matt's Bar, which I love the simplicity of the Matt's Bar. It's a great name. There's a bar in San Francisco just called Bar, which is I think the only way you could take that a little bit further, unless you were just to call your place Matt.
Yeah, come to Matt. Hey, I'm Matt. Come to my bar.
Yeah, sure. That would
said the advertisement.
Make the whole place called Hey Matt, come to my bar. I'm into that.
Just on the walls are just tons of different pictures of Matt and just things like text bubbles that just say Matt on them. That's the entire decor.
And so I had that. It was at Matt's Bar. It was very tasty. Went to some other bar that I can't remember the name of that had just a live polka band for 4 hours. It was very impressive. They were taking requests and everything, doing modern songs. And it's not like they were young and being ironic about it. They were 60s and 70s and doing this polka.
That's how I want my polka, aged to perfection.
Yeah. They knew what was up. They've been doing this for a long time. And they'd be like, do you want to request a song? And I was like, well, like what? And like, whatever. We can figure it out. I was like, okay. All right. I tried to ask for Prince, and they said that they couldn't do.
Do you know Wrecking Ball?
Didn't hear any Miley Cyrus, but that might have been what I should have done next. That should have been my. If you don't have Prince, then I just go straight to Miley Cyrus.
Yeah, that seems like a totally logical through line. So you went to this wedding. You went to Minnesota.
Yeah, before that, because we did not have a Friday show because there was some stuff going on the website on Friday that we wanted to get out of the way of and make sure that got the.
Well, and also you were in the process of traveling that whole time.
I was driving to Minnesota on Friday, but that made it convenient that there was some stuff going on the site as well. But before that, I've been playing The Evil Within, the new Shinji Mikami game from Tango. I forget what the Tango Game. Is it Tango Gameworks?
I want to say it's Tango Gameworks. That sounds right.
Tango Gameworks. Yeah, Tango Gameworks. Which is the new studio from Shinji Mikami, who worked on Resident Evil 4. He's worked on a shitload of amazing games during his long career at Capcom. Now he's on his own, making his own thing, and Evil Within is his first project, published by Bethesda. In fact, Bethesda bought Tango prior to. I don't know if I guess they must have bought him before Evil Within was announced. I guess that would probably make more sense. But in any case, it is, we've had this feeling about this game before it came out. It very much looks like he picked up exactly where he left off with Resident Evil 4, and trying to make a game that is a sort of quiet evolution of that. I would say that is fairly consistent with what's going on here. It's a game in which Resident Evil 4 didn't have a lot of sneaking around. Stealth hadn't really been incorporated into action games all that much at that point. But in Resident Evil 4, famously, the introductory village sequence involves entering a town that seems otherwise fine, and then a mass of villagers with pitchforks and torches slowly coming after you, in which the horror is more akin to what like George Romero's zombie films are about, which is you are not killed because of one slow zombie that can't do anything. You're killed because you make a stupid mistake trying to run from 20 shambling zombies that sort of freak you out and cause you to panic en masse. And there's a lot more variety to the enemies in Evil Within, and I would say the enemies are basically kind of what define what's going on in the Evil Within. The stages are sort of structured around the different enemies that you'll encounter, and I found that part to be really interesting. The game has a pretty crappy opening. It doesn't do a great job of sort of introducing you. It does an okay job of introducing you to the world, but I didn't feel like I had a particularly great grasp on how I should be playing the game until the third chapter, and it's sort of agreed upon that in chapter 3, which opens with you in a kind of village sequence that's sort of wide open. You have a lot of opportunities to run around and hide and formulate strategies. That's kind of where you start to get your feet underneath you about exactly how you're going to end up playing The Evil Within, which is a game for the first time in which I feel like when a game says it's about survival horror, like The Evil Within kind of means it. In the sense that you don't get access to a lot of ammunition, and you got to make your shots count, and upgrading your accuracy is actually incredibly important because those shots become very vital to your survival when you only have 7 bullets.
Now, there are other weapons you can use, obviously, besides guns against some of these enemies, correct?
Yeah, the game has sort of like a whole trap system in which there are traps already kind of around the area, and you can make the decision to use those traps. Like, for example, there'll be like bear traps, which I think the enemies can walk into. There's bear traps. There are sort of like tripwires. There are like bombs that are situated on the walls, and you can use those. Like, for example, if the bombs won't go off when the enemies come by, but you can shoot them and they'll explode. Or you can have them hit the tripwires, blah, blah, blah. But you can also dismantle them for trap parts, and the trap parts can then be used to build ammunition for a crossbow. So,
Okay.
and the crossbow has access to all, like once you get access to the crossbow, it really changes how you can play the game because you get access to an amazing array of ammunition. So you have like your very basic, just like a giant bolt that you can use to shove that through an enemy's head, and if they're near a wall, it can pin them to it. But it also has, your basic firebolt. It's got the ones that are really interesting are like there's a flash bolt, and you shoot that at the ground, and it's basically like a flash grenade, and it causes all the enemies to become basically disoriented. But what's critical about it is not that they're just disoriented, but then they become susceptible to stealth kills, and stealth kills are one-hit kill in which you use a knife and it doesn't consume any ammunition. So what's amazing about that is that if you get a group of 3 guys, you can shoot that flashbolt down and probably take out 2 of them while only having consumed 1 flashbolt and no actual ammunition. So then that's how the game sort of starts expanding what you're doing, because you're trying to use this different ammunition in different ways that allow you to conserve what you want for very critical moments. Like, you want to use that shotgun when you got no other option but that shotgun in order to get yourself out of a situation, because you're not going to come across enough ammunition to just constantly be unloading it into dudes.
Gotcha. So I guess the question I would be posing you at this point is, have you been enjoying it? Because the thing I've gotten from a lot of people who've played it is that there are certainly parts in there that are interesting or entertaining or thrilling in various capacities, but the pacing of it has made it very difficult for a lot of people I know to actually say they like The Evil Within. Like, the fact that it does seem to be no real respite from the just like nonstop tension of the game has been constantly pointed out as a problem. Have you found yourself having that problem?
It feels a lot like Dead Space 1. Dead Space 1 was a game that never quite let up. It's been a long time since I've played the original Dead Space, but part of what I found really interesting about it was that it certainly had its fair share of jump scares, and it did go plenty of times try and startle you. But what was amazing about the original Dead Space was that it was just this constant tension, this constant sense of dread that never allowed you to feel fully comfortable at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And The Evil Within definitely reproduces that in a way that, to compare it to another game most recently, Alien Isolation. Not that Alien Isolation wasn't tense, because obviously you have this creature that's stalking you, but a lot of what was happening in Alien Isolation was sort of a known quantity, right? That you become comfortable with, as comfortable as you can get with an alien stalking you for 20 hours. You become at least you understand what that alien's going to do, and then it's a matter of how do you take advantage of the environment and the items you have in front of you to try and manage that situation. What's interesting about the Evil Within is that it is constantly mixing up exactly what you have to do, so that tension never goes away because you're never quite sure exactly what you should be applying to the next situation. So here's a good example. So you're introduced to very briefly early on to an enemy type in which they are completely invisible but have a predator-like sort of mirage, sort of, like a blur.
There's a distortion that appears around.
Yeah, but it's extremely subtle. It's extremely subtle, and to the point where once you've noticed that they're there, it might be too late for you to actually do anything about it. But it is possible that if you have your gun out, you see it, because when you pull your gun out, the game zooms in a little bit, and the game's already kind of oppressive. The camera is very close to the main character at all times. So when it moves in a little bit closer, it's even more tense because yes, it gives you an opportunity to fine-tune your shot, but that doesn't really help when what you're looking for is just a messy blur slowly stalking about. And
I'm guessing these are not super well-lit environments to begin with.
So that's the thing, right? If you were talking about looking for, like in some sequences in the movie Predator, where you have, a lit sequence in which you're looking for a slight difference in the environment, that's one thing. But what's happening is there's an extended sequence in which you encounter 3 or 4 of these enemies throughout this hospital section, and you can't see shit. Like it's terrifying. And when I was dying over and over because I could not come up with what would happen is you'd walk into the room and you'd see a chair just like go flailing across the screen, and you know immediately what you're dealing with, but you don't have a lot of great options on how to deal with it. You can try and wait for them to come up to you and start grappling with you, and then you can get out of that, kind of like by wiggling the left stick. But you're going to get hit by a chunk of health. Health is pretty hard to come by in the game, and you don't want to waste ammunition because it's a precious resource. So fortunately, I had stockpiled this one bolt for your crossbow in which it's basically a proximity mine, and so I would wait for it to trigger. I'd go in front of a doorway in which I'm going to be kind of enclosed in a room, and I would just shoot one of those down, knowing that he's going to come after me, and then the moment that he hits that proximity mine, he is briefly brought into reality, and you can see him, so you can get over there, you can go into his corpse, and you can start stomping on it, or you can burn him on fire, and there are a couple other options to sort of conserve your ammunition. But man, like, you go through this sequence in which you know you're going to fight enemies, and you know you're going to see another one of these guys, but he's going to be invisible every single goddamn time you see him. And so the moment that anything occurs or you see him come across the screen, or at least it's indicated there's something in the room, it's just profoundly uncomfortable, because at least with the other enemies, there are visual cues, there are audio cues that allow you to sort of apply previous tactics, and that's just not something you can do here at all, and it makes for, one of those sequences that I don't know if I'd call fun, but you look back on it and go, holy shit, I'm really glad I am through that section.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Yeah, I'm thinking this game is probably not for me. Which isn't to say that I can't appreciate a good tense horror game, but this sounds like it's the kind of oppressive that would cause me to stop playing it after a few hours. Like the kind of thing that's just so intense from the get-go, and then also, you run into situations like this where you are, constantly having to sort of bump up against these enemies that, like, you have to work very hard to even locate, let alone deal with. I think that would just drive me up the wall.
Yeah, I have found it to be a fairly challenging game as well. I die a lot in The Evil Within. I'm enjoying it quite a bit, but yeah, it's if you're only going to play one of the 2 horror games, I've only played up through the end of Chapter 5 and at the beginning of Chapter 6. I believe there are 14 in The Evil Within.
Yeah.
Right now, if you were to ask me, hey, I can only do one, I'm not like you. I don't want to play all of these and be scared all the time. I would say Alien Isolation is the way to go. And I think part of what informs, Evil Within being tense versus scary, even though I think that's kind of a fine line to distinguish between, is that you have access to guns, right? You know,
Right.
you have access to weaponry in Alien Isolation, but you can't kill the alien, right? Like you can't ever truly stop the creature until you can't just halfway through the game. Well, now this is gonna be a cakewalk because I shot it between the eyes. Like it doesn't work like that in Isolation. It's a game where
Right.
you're constantly stalked by it till the story determines that you're not. And Evil Within, you actually have access to weapons and enemies that you can kill and get rid of in a way that they are well and truly gone from the map. So that creates the tension because you know that you have some control of the situation, but it's trying to maintain that control that produces sort of you freaking out over your inability to shoot that thing in the goddamn head. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's an interesting game. I think it's going to be polarizing in a way that Isolation is probably not, even though I thought Isolation was already kind of polarizing to some folks. But I think Evil Within is going to be even more so. And here's a question. I'm gonna write about this probably today after I get Worth reading up. But so this game has a really large widescreen.
It's like letterboxed very heavily, right?
Yeah. Also, hold on. I just want to address in the chat. People are like, did you just spoil Alien? I was like, no. There are just moments in Alien when you have a reprieve from the creature, in which
That's not a spoiler.
There are moments where you don't have to worry about it following you. So I'm not. That's all I was saying about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this game has. It's not just black borders. Like these are thick ass black borders, and it's hard. Tango Gameworks has made the suggestion that it is artistic intent, that they are going for a cinematic look that is intentional, and this is something that they want to convey through this game's aesthetic that they believe will inform the gameplay as a result. And I don't know if I buy that. It's possible, right? It's hard for me to really know. Like, are they lying to me and just wanted to save real estate on the screen that allowed the game to run at a faster frame rate? Possible. I don't really know. I can't really know because, of course, they wouldn't say that. Probably. They're going to fall back on the cinematic argument because it's one that's been used in video games before, and games are obviously heavily influenced by film. And on the PC version, people have put out a patch for you to remove that, in which you can fill the frame and you can see everything around you. And what's got me considering applying that patch is because I have found that the black bars are actually a detriment to playing, and not in a way that produces tension, right? Like I don't feel like the black bars are being used to frame the world in a particular way that you go, wow, it's really interesting how they're using this, because the player controls the camera. So if we were talking about original Resident Evil, in which the designers are controlling the perspective, I could see the argument for how widescreen could potentially play a role, because the designers have full control over what you're actually seeing. But in this case, and this is the most profound example and the one that frustrated me the most, there is in chapter 3 there's a giant ladder you can walk up, and the enemies can't follow you up the ladder, at least the enemies I have encountered. And I would go up to the top, and there's a bunch of items up there, and then as I'm coming down, I cannot see what's below me.
Right.
If you try and aim from the top down, you can't look far enough down. If you go down the ladder, you try and aim the camera, you can't see what's fully below you. And that doesn't feel... That feels cheap.
Yeah.
Or that just feels like that's a negative consequence of the framing, that if I had the additional real estate on the screen, I would be able to see that enemy. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. What I'm going to write about, and I'm curious what you think about, is if I assume that's artistic intent, that they have those widescreen bars because it is how they wanted to present the Evil Within, but I have the ability to circumvent that artistic intent because I feel like it enhances the game, or at least the way I want to play it. Like, is that just that's a cool thing that you can do in video games, or is that just a weird subversion that maybe goes a step too far?
I look at it this way. I would say that it's only a problem if you consider artistic intent in any way infallible. I think that if you find the way they have presented the game to be detrimental to your own enjoyment of it, then I don't think there's anything really wrong with circumventing that in this situation, because in a sense you're taking the game that the way they presented it, you have experienced it the way they wanted it presented, and you don't like it. And someone has gone to the measure of removing that letterboxing to make the experience slightly more palatable to people who find that stuff frustrating. And while that might not go with what Mikami and his team wanted the game to be, once a product's out in the wild, I don't think that there's really anything that you should feel guilty about if it enhances your personal experience. Like, just because that is their intent does not mean that the game is actually meaningfully improved by the fact that they have done this.
And what's odd is that there's I believe, a console command to remove the black bars, but it does that by just zooming in and cropping, which is not ideal. The game's already pretty zoomed in, and then the fan patch is what gives it like an actual full frame without actually doing these sort of cropping compromise that the developers put in. So yeah, I don't know. I've wrestled with that because I'd like to play games, even if it's different than how I would maybe necessarily want to play them. I think it's interesting that if the developer really felt passionate about this is how we want you to experience that, then that's what I want to do. Like I've played, I played Killzone 3 with a Move controller the entire time, start to finish, because I wanted to see what was it like. It was like, hey, they incorporated this. They're saying this is a way to play this game. I want to see what it's like to play an entire shooter 10 hours, front to back with a Move controller. And I found it fascinating. It was fine. I wouldn't do it again. But I don't know. Yeah, I feel like most people would probably fall on your side, which is to say, if you gave it a shot and you don't like it, and the game experience would be improved with the full frame look, and you can modify the game to do that, then go for it. But I think it's an interesting question, and it's certainly one that is only possible with video games, because it's not like if you don't enjoy widescreen in a film, you can't just log in and hack in the additional footage that does not exist.
Yeah. And there have been a bunch of people in the chat saying that in reality that they think that the letterboxing has more to do with technical concerns than anything else. Some people have said that they've had basically the game runs much better, say, on the PC with the letterboxing on than with that mod implemented and everything in the frame. I don't know how true that is. I don't know what the reality of that stuff is. Again, we're spitballing here based on the concept that this was indeed artistic intent and not just some sort of like technical workaround. So that was what that conversation was about. But there are some people who seem to think this might also be just a tech thing. So who knows?
hard to tell. But I think it raises a sort of fascinating question, regardless.
It does
about how you fall on that. So all right, well you can say the games you've been playing, but you can't actually talk about them till Friday, right?
Yeah. Regrettably, I spent this weekend playing some embargoed ass games. I played through a fair amount of Civilization Beyond Earth, which is out this Tuesday. I will have hopefully a review of this week. We'll do a proper quick look for as well. And I have also been playing, full disclosure, the company I used to work for's latest game, Disney Harmonix presents Fantasia, Dance Central, whatever that game is called. It's Fantasia. Just call it Fantasia.
Music Evolved?
Music Evolved. There we go. Sure. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. I have a copy of that too. I'm curious. I have not ever played it in any event or anything like that, largely because Jeff always goes to harangue John Drake for whatever appointment that would be. So
Yeah.
I was never on those, but I'm curious to see it. I like Kinect stuff, and Harmonix has certainly shown a finesse for making that device do some interesting things to it. And my wife loves Disney stuff, so she'll probably be into trying to check that out. But is this the last? This is probably the last Harmonix Kinect game they ever make, right?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it sort of depends on how. I guess it sort of depends on how Dance Central does for them. You know, if that continues to be something valuable to them, if people continue to play those games. I mean, it sort of depends on whether Kinect remains something that Microsoft will promote in any way, shape, or form. Because right now, like, they have these Kinect games hitting, and they are sort of dealing with them, and they are very, very lightly promoting them. It will be interesting to see how they react depending on how sales of this go. Tiger the Cat says Civ is actually out on Friday, not Tuesday. Well, now I know that. But that's neither here nor there. Either way, I can't talk about either game until the embargoes are up, really. I can say that I have played a decent amount of both of them, and I will have more to say about them later. I'm obviously not going to review Fantasia because I don't review Harmonix products. And that's
what if I don't play it and I just review it? I'll just write up, what back of the box. I'm going to review your game.
I would love to see what your review of Fantasia would look like after not ever playing Fantasia. I think that would be really interesting to read, if nothing else.
It's going to fit within my my other hotly anticipated coverage of the review of the LG 440 App Store.
We're spitballing ideas here, man. We're making content just off the top of our head. Just content's just spilling out.
This is how Giant Bomb works. This is how you're getting a free insight into the creative process of this website. Yes, I agree. It's profoundly disappointing.
It is extremely.
So I got some questions from folks that I gathered over the weekend. Okay, Mr. Creeper, which that's pretty good. That's a pretty good name. He asked, the one question that truly defines a man: tacos or nachos? Alex? I disagree with the premise of the question, but continue.
Tacos can come in crunchy or soft form. They contain multitudes.
You're saying you have more options with the taco.
At the same time, nachos can come with a variety of different toppings.
It's true.
So in their own way, they also contain multitudes.
Saying this is just the benefit of Mexican food?
What I'm saying is that we shouldn't feel the necessity to pigeonhole our identities in regards to the Mexican food that we consume.
What I'm saying is that the actual answer is not contained within the question, which is burritos.
Now you're just being snide. Like you're not even really giving this question a fair shake. And
right, because the question didn't give Mexican food a fair shake.
Fucking tacos. I don't know. I'd rather eat tacos. Tacos are good.
Yeah, if I have to choose, tacos. But partially because so you're talking about your multitudes, right? So you got with nachos, it's like, hey, are you getting chicken or are you getting steak? You got to choose one. It's all over the nachos. You're not mixing and matching. With tacos, I can get fish taco, get steak taco, get chorizo taco. I can fit my entire range of tastes and options and preferences without breaking the bank on one thing of nachos. Tacos, you get options. That's the one thing that tacos have over burritos.
I ain't heard of no fish nachos. That ain't a thing that people eat.
No, that's not
something anyone would ever eat.
Gross.
Yeah.
I'd eat a lot of fish, probably. That's probably why they don't do that.
What if you filled a taco with just chips?
Don't tell Taco Bell that. Be on the menu tomorrow.
Walk in there and it's just like, hey, we've got this new meat-free taco. It's full of Fritos.
Yeah.
Think about it.
My answer is burritos, but I guess tacos, if I have to answer the question.
I mean, that's just corn. It's just corn chips or maize.
Yeah. God, I miss burritos. Chicago's a taco town, and it's been a hard transition,
I'm
man.
frankly amazed you can find decent tacos there because, if I'm being honest, like most of the Mexican food I've had in anywhere in the Midwest has been profoundly disappointing.
Yeah, no, it's like I can't say I've done my full taco research in Chicago, so I don't want to draw a conclusion too early, because again, I mostly just get disappointed that there's no burritos and just get something else instead of Mexican food. But uh, it's kind of like adjusting to pizza in San Francisco. It's all right. You can find some places you're okay with, but come on, come
I
on.
look forward to your exhaustive research on the taco quality of Chicago being published in the latest science journals.
Yeah, also known as premium content.
Yes.
Hmm.
Next question.
Anonymous asks, what do you think Sony will price Project Morpheus at? I guess this is assuming that they actually ship it, which I think they will. Do you think they'll bundle Move controllers then? I really hope Sony is smart about Project Morpheus and has a strong lineup of games for the launch and supports it well after. Thanks, Tom.
Do we know what the eventual retail pricing is going to be for Oculus? Have they really talked about that yet?
No. Let me see what the A2 price.
So I have a real hard time guessing what the pricing of something like this might be because there's not really any equivalent technology out there to sort of price it against.
So the development kit 2, which is the latest Oculus prototype that you can purchase as a developer, but anyone can buy it, is $350.
Mm.
So you would imagine it's not going to cost more than that. But
if anything, you would think it would cost a little less.
But I don't think significantly.
No.
I think we're talking about both for the Oculus and Project Morpheus, serious kits. These are not, it's not just a piece of glass. There's a lot going on in there, software and hardware wise. So, if I have to, take a total shot in the dark and, with all the reason to be wrong, I'd say bare minimum $250, but wouldn't be shocked.
$299.
I'd say $299 is not unreasonable.
Yeah, that's just my spitball guess, pure based on no actual research or relevant information other than the basic price point for those dev kits. I think that $299 is a price that they could charge and still get people interested in what they're doing.
Yeah, and maybe that comes with the PlayStation Eye for the head tracking stuff. Which seems to be that's kind of the new way that these devices are making that of a higher quality is by using webcams to enhance it. So I guess $300 with a PlayStation Eye and whatever is the high profile game that ships with that. I think that might be a pretty. Either there has to be a lot of free stuff on the store to get people to have something to do with it, or it has to ship with. I guess maybe it could ship with like a variety pack sort of thing. Like, here's a bunch of goofy experiments to mess around with on your Project Morpheus, or whatever whatever they end up calling that thing when it actually ships, assuming it ships. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be cheap. I don't necessarily think it's going to ship with the PlayStation Move. I know that's kind of what they've been demoing it with, is like the moves kind of attached to it in order to simulate that positional tracking, but. Yeah, I don't know. We'll probably find out, sometime next year. I feel like, although we've been saying that maybe for 18 months now, it's like, oh, next year's the year of VR. Although it feels like 2015 is maybe actually the year of VR in some serious way.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Of course, we're also assuming that Sony is going to price directly against whatever Oculus ends up doing. For all we know, they could just charge like $600 for that thing, because you never know. You never know. They're a wild card.
Yeah, it's going to be. Oculus is going to be in a position where Facebook said they want to sell it at cost. Sony's not a company that is going to be able to sell it at cost.
Probably not.
Sony is a consumer electronics company that makes money on margins. And I guess it's possible they could sell it at cost, but that's would go counter to traditionally how this stuff is, how accessories are sold.
Sure.
It's the way console hardware has been sold in the past is that you sell it and you don't make you make a loss on the hardware and make it up on the software, And I guess they could do the same thing with Morpheus, but I don't know. Facebook is in a position where they have tons of money to burn, so they truly can sell it at whatever it costs them to make it, just so they can get more of it out there, and then maybe that would bring that price down below $300. I'm not sure. That's where we're talking outside of our realm of expertise, but I do think that question of at cost is something that will profoundly shape sort of Sony's approach and Oculus's approach, because they're coming at it from different angles just based on the way those companies are structured.
Yeah. Ron Galaxy points out that Sony was selling the PS3 at a loss for a while. Yeah, and we all saw how well that all worked out for them.
Yeah, and I'm not. Yeah, that's definitely been how console hardware is sold.
Yeah.
But I think accessories are slightly different, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they will sell it.
And they usually don't sell them at a loss at the start. That's something they move back from, usually, I feel like.
I'm pretty sure PS3 was sold at a loss for a long, long time. It was part of the big problem with that machine was that it had a slow start, and they were also losing shitloads of money on it. And that's always been Nintendo's thing, is that they've always historically made money on their hardware right off the bat, so that even in an era like the GameCube, in which they were solidly in third place, they were still an extremely profitable company because the hardware was making money hand over fist from the beginning. So, let's see. Iris Buttface, great name.
That's good.
When do you think people get tired of annual franchises that AAA developers continually turn out? For example, we're on the 8th or maybe 9th Assassin's Creed game coming out this year. If you could read that question in a certain way that suggests there are 8 or 9 Assassin's Creed games coming out this year alone, which also does not feel totally off the mark, it's not a very long span of time. Some annual franchises like sports games make sense, but even some of these franchises die out.
So wait, what was the actual question? When does this become not viable?
Yeah, when do let's just take Assassin's Creed, but there's certainly other franchises. But I think Assassin's Creed, in terms of a series in the last 10 years that has jumped into annualizing the way that Call of Duty has, or sports games has, Assassin's Creed is probably our best example of that in a non-shooter sports fashion. Like, when do people get tired of this? How does this go?
I mean, that's sort of a hard question, because I feel like it really just depends on how well the developers are able to keep people's interest with the quality of the games. Like, there are yearly franchises that have ceased to become annual. There are annual franchises that have been annual for a very long time and have continued to maintain, user interest over the course of that span. Call of Duty, still incredibly popular. Maybe not quite the sales juggernaut it was at its peak, but it still sells more than a lot of games. Assassin's Creed, we talk constantly about how sort of out of gas that series has felt at various points. But then, Assassin's Creed 4 comes along and kind of surprises everyone. It's like, oh, hey, wait, there's still stuff that we like in this. I don't think I can really pinpoint a timetable or a specific flashpoint for when that stuff no longer becomes viable to people, because it's just that shit's wildly unpredictable. It just sort of depends on when, people as a whole just sort of aren't interested in what those games are doing anymore.
Yeah, they'll stop making it when they stop making them.
Mostly interested in what Assassin's Creed and Call of Duty and those games are doing. There are people who complain about it, but they're still out there. Rock Band, Shanu just mentioned that. Rock Band and Guitar Hero. There's a perfect example of something that was annualized very heavily and people burned out on after a certain amount of time. Granted, the cost associated with those games, I imagine, had something to do with it as well. But that is an example of franchises that just eventually burned out.
Yeah. And the short answer to the person's question is, when people stop buying them, they'll stop making them. That's basically the ultimate line that is crossed with this stuff. Is, yeah, if they're not making money, then they're going to look for a new golden goose. Destiny is Activision trying to play the long game with Call of Duty. Sort of saying, hey, basically they thought that Call of Duty was going to be on the wane sooner than it's actually happening.
Right.
And so, they're getting the best of both worlds. They're potentially starting another blockbuster franchise while their other one is still firing, maybe not quite on all cylinders, but it is certainly still enormously popular. And people are creatures of habit. That's why sports franchises do well. That's why Assassin's Creed does well. That's why Call of Duty does well. Especially for folks that aren't like us, and by us I mean, sort of like that read websites like Giant Bomb or are very much into video games, reading up on what's the latest and greatest and what's interesting. People find something they like, and that new one comes out the next year, and they buy it, and they're happy, and they move on with their lives. For us that play so many games and maybe burn out on this stuff because we get so deep into it, it's not the case for a lot of other people, in which maybe they play a handful of games each year, and Assassin's Creed is something they really enjoy, and they spend, that chunk of 20, 25 hours with it once a year, and that's just fine. And I think that actually, probably explains a lot of this stuff, is that, and why some of these franchises get entrenched is they maintain a certain level of quality that we, as the most hardcore, can see the dips. If you're talking about the Call of Duty games, for a while when Treyarch was Treyarch's making it this year. You didn't see that reflected in the sales all that much, and I think that's just because, for the layman, they may have their ones they prefer, but they're all pretty much pretty good, and that's okay with them. And that's how these franchises kind of just become stuck, and why these developers get to continue making them, and making as much money as they do, because they're good enough for people once they found something they liked. And the process of going out to find something else, that's just not high on their priority list.
Yeah. You mentioning Treyarch just reminded me of Neversoft, and that's another prime example of a essentially annualized franchise that was just run into the ground. Tony Hawk. Remember how many damn Tony Hawk games there were?
Yeah.
Eventually people just stopped buying them. Eventually they stopped running out of things to do with them, and it died. Just takes time.
It does, yeah. And, but it won't be, it just transitions to something else, right? If it's not Call of Duty, it's Destiny. If it's not Assassin's Creed, it's Shadow of Mordor. There's always something else to step up and fill that void. It's just a matter of, I would say Tony Hawk and Guitar Hero, if we're to assume that Guitar Hero contributed to Rock Band's decline, because I don't think Rock Band necessarily declined all that much in quality in between releases. It may have increased in complexity in a way that perhaps maybe turned off some folks. But I think Guitar Hero greatly contributed to the decline of that genre, with the frequency at which it released games. It's just the level of quality wasn't maintained. The difference between different versions of Guitar Hero that were coming out were all over the place. The level of quality on the Tony Hawk games in its later years, all over the place. And I think the variation in quality there was much different than, between one Call of Duty or one Assassin's Creed. At least in my opinion.
And it's unfortunate because there were really good Guitar Hero games under the Activision banner. World Tour had a lot of really good ideas. Metallica, for being a band-focused game, was pretty goddamn fun. But then you had stuff like Warriors of Rock, which was, kind of felt like kind of a last gasp, and also that Van Halen game that they literally were trying to give away for free because they just didn't want to do anything with it after it was done. But even on the Rock Band side, you had stuff like Green Day, which was fine, but nobody bought that game, and there's a pretty good reason why.
Because you play 6 Green Day songs, and you don't want to play any more Green Day songs.
Well, and on top of that, it's just Green Day, I don't think has quite the level of, I'm gonna say, cultural cachet that some of the other bands that had band-focused games had. So it was just sort of cool. Here, I'm still looking at Billy Joe. That's great. Why did I pay $40 for this?
That was my problem with all of those, with the exception of Beatles, and that's because the Beatles range so far in style. I think also helps. When you're playing a game all about Beatles songs, that it helps that the dynamic changes all the time with the kinds of music they were creating, especially in their later years. But just who wants to sit and listen to, or let alone play, 30, 40 songs of the same band? That's just not how you listen to music. And so that was ultimately the problem with any of those. Not to say that some were made better than others, and I think probably Metallica and Beatles are probably the apex of those offshoots. But just that's not. It's not reflective of how people listen to music, which is on shuffle, which is maybe an album, but there aren't many times you're like, man, I'm going to listen to Green Day all day long. It's just not what we do.
And if that is something you're saying to yourself, take a long, hard look at what your life has become.
I like Green Day.
I like Green Day too.
Just like anyone likes Green Day.
I have gone to Green Day shows, both when they were still fucking playing around Berkeley and when they were a fucking stadium act. There are good Green Day songs. I'm not saying they are a, unpraisable band. I'm simply saying, why would you pay for a fucking whole game of them? I've just never understood that thinking.
Yeah. I mean, Dookie is a classic. That is a Hall of Fame album right there. However you feel about where they have gone their later years, at least they've been experimental. I'll give them credit for that. It's something I've maintained an interest in, but yeah, I mean Dookie was like that is up there in terms of, I don't know. It's a good album. It's a really good album. It's a classic.
Hoshino Senshi asks, what do I think about Lego Rock Band? It's a kid's game, and it's a much more interesting, I think, kid-focused game than Band Hero was, but I don't think Lego Rock Band was a necessary thing.
That's the only one I didn't play of all the Rock Band games.
It's fine. It's cute in certain respects, but I don't think it was a game that the marketplace demanded.
What do you think Rock Band 4 would be? They're going to make another Rock Band, right? Like they will. That franchise has enough reverence. They will bring that back in some capacity. Or maybe not what you think they'll do. What would you want them to do to bring back Rock Band?
That's a hard question, because I'm trying to think what they could do meaningfully beyond the scope of what they tried to do with Rock Band 3. We saw what a tough sell Rock Band 3 was. Like, there had just become so many peripherals, and they'd already kind of reached out beyond the core, guitar, bass, drums thing into the keyboard realm. And I think it did that stuff well, but it was hard to get people interested in it because it just felt so huge, so top-heavy, so complicated in a lot of ways. You had the real guitar stuff. You had the keyboards and just like ion drums and all that other shit. I think that if they do something for this current generation of consoles and they decide to bring back Rock Band, I think they should actually take a couple of lessons learned from Rocksmith. I think that, Rocksmith has done a good job of sort of positioning itself as this teaching tool for guitar while still being a relatively fun game, and also not a terribly complicated one, because it doesn't require you to go out and buy all these peripherals. It's just like, here's this plug your goddamn real guitar into it, and just go. That is what I think Rock Band was kind of missing at a certain point, was that level of just like simplicity of structure, of just being able to sort of plug something in and go. And I think that's what they need to kind of focus on if they're going to do it, is just finding a way to make it the most user-friendly experience they can. Because learning real guitar in Rock Band 3 was nightmarish. It's not that their system was bad, it's that it just didn't make a lot of sense if you didn't already kind of understand guitar, and a lot of people, I think, who did already kind of understand guitar thought their way of translating that into game language was a little bit confusing.
It was also the first time someone had tried to do it, basically.
It was a first try at something like that, and I think it was a cool first try, but I think it also put a lot of people off. I don't know how you sell that game at this point. I think that anything you do will end up being very expensive. You'll have to, do the drum thing again. You'll have to start figuring out how you translate real guitars again. I think getting people back into the idea of Rock Band is harder than a lot of people give it credit for. It is a franchise with reverence, but it is also a hard thing to position in the current market and climate. So I don't know. I spend a lot of time thinking about that, how it would work, and every time I think about it, it's like, yeah, a new Rock Band game would be really fun. I have no idea who would even buy it at this point. I don't know who would.
I think it's one of those games, and it's why probably they have to be so cautious about it. And it's why they don't squash the idea, outright in interviews and things like that, because I think it's, when you ask someone, would you like a new Rock Band? I think most people would say yes. But then when you're faced with the reality of, are you willing to pay $300 for a Rock Band, a whole new set of instruments, because none of that stuff is compatible with the new consoles you own, and also you're gonna have to rebuy those songs because that stuff's not gonna transfer.
Yeah.
That's a really really hard sell when you kind of get down to the brass tacks of how it would work. My selfishly what I always wanted from Rock Band was I would love a subscription service. Like that's what I want. It's how I listen to all my music now. I listen to Spotify through everything, or Apple's music app. Like we have transitioned to, culturally, we have largely been moving away from paying for albums or tracks, and we just sort of pay a flat fee and listen to whatever we want. You certainly can make the argument that is worse for the artist, but that is where we are, and that is what we have become sort of consumers habitually, and that's what I want from rock. Like I'd be willing to go down the road of buying new instruments, or maybe a new instrument, right? Like maybe I just bought guitar or something like that. Maybe I didn't go whole hog, but I am unwilling to pay $4 for a song that only exists in Rock Band again.
Sure.
I will not. I don't think you can sell that in 2014. I think if they ever were going to bring it back, it would have to be a flat fee to access a larger database.
It would have to be what they said Rock Band was from the get-go, which is to say a single platform. They have, they kind of fudged that a little bit by releasing sequels, but then giving you the old music, or as much of the old music as they could from the other games, and letting you transfer those into the new games. But what they'd actually have to do is something I think maybe a little bit more akin to that latest Dance Central game, which is to say, here is a hub that has a small number of songs attached to it. If you pay for this music service that goes along with it, you'll get this entire library of songs that we then, continue to license for however long the lifespan of the game is. I don't think that's going to happen, though, because as much as it pains me to say it, I don't think the kind of music that a Rock Band game would need to survive is what is of interest to the marketplace right now. Rock music, bands, that kind of stuff, like classic, even the classic or current, there's just not a huge groundswell of interest in that stuff right now. I love that music, and I think that they did a pretty good job of balancing, the old and the new and the old games. But if you look at what the modern landscape of what music is right now, there's a reason why Dance Central became their focus, because that's kind of where popular music is at right now, and that's fine. But that also makes it a lot harder to sell a game called Rock Band in 2014.
Yeah, I still think it's an interesting thought experiment, and I'd be curious to see, whatever they end up doing, what they thought might work, even if they never end up shipping any of that stuff, because I have to imagine it's something they are constantly experimenting with. And you mentioned the Rocksmith idea. I don't think they could ship a pro-focused Rock Band because I think Rocksmith has eaten up that audience is fairly small, and Rocksmith seems to be making those people very, very happy. Even though I haven't engaged with Rocksmith, Vinny's a better person to answer this question, but it's hard for me to imagine that they'd suddenly be able to offer something that's like, well, screw Rocksmith, I'm switching to Rock Band.
But that's sort of my point, is not so much that it needs to become the same kind of teaching tool that Rocksmith was, but it needs that level of simplicity, that to remove the barriers of entry as much as it can, something that you can just plug a goddamn instrument into and go. And because that's a much easier sell than trying to say, and also you need to buy this guitar controller and also this other microphone and these other shit. You just need to find a way to simplify the sale to people, because the more peripherals you attach to it, the worse you're going to do in this current marketplace. You're never going to get a GameStop to sell giant boxes of plastic instruments ever again. It's never going to happen.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. Anyway, that's probably enough speculating about Rock Band, but that speaks to how much I enjoyed those years with that series, and wish that the market realities didn't make it so difficult to have that exist in right now, because there are times that I wish I could pull that out, but I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Oh, so I guess this week you're playing Civ. You're going to try and write a review for Friday?
Yeah, whenever I'll double check when the embargo is, but I think it should be right around release. And I yeah, that's just get through that and some other stuff this week. That's pretty much all I got on my docket. What about you?
Is the Extra Life stuff this week? Is that this week?
I think so. I don't know if we've locked that schedule down yet, so probably we should hold off on that. But
Yeah. Okay. There's stuff
there
going
is
on.
extra life stuff going to happen.
Yeah. So
I think.
yeah. So stay tuned. Stay tuned. All the Spoon with Scoops. I'm not sure when. Maybe tomorrow. I have to see what's going on with what I just alluded to before I commit to a time on that. But there'll be some other stuff going on this week. Hopefully, I'll hear back from John Carpenter. Have some new questions to share from him later this week. And yeah, Worth Reading will be going up not too long after we finish the show. And yeah, I'm gonna play The Evil Within. I don't know if I'll ever get around to writing a review, but maybe if I finish that in the next week or so, I'll try and put down some thoughts. But Alex, I guess I'll talk to you on Friday. I think I could tentatively say that it sounds like we might have Kara Ellison with us live from Tokyo on Friday's show. She sent me a message.
Friday, goodness, what are we even doing? What's happening anymore?
I don't know. She's in Tokyo. She's like, I want to come on. And I was like, okay. So if I just say it now I'm publicly committing to it. So hopefully we can have Kara's join from wherever she is in the land of Japan sometime on Friday. But that's gonna do it for us. And Alex, I will talk to you on Friday.
Oh.